Our final speaker of the afternoon is Calvin Abbasi. He's a graduate student from the Department of Communication Studies. And today, Calvin will be talking to us about a nonviolent communicative model of argumentation.
I want everyone to think about the last time they were in a political argument, whether it was on Facebook or with friends or, God forbid, with family. Just think for a moment. Was it a civil, reasonable discussion where two sides with reasonable disagreements came to some kind of, even if they didn't agree, a cooperative understanding of the issue at hand? Or did it feel more like this? A raging, toxic dumpster fire with ad hominem attacks and misinformation and mischaracterization? Probably the latter, right? Political discourse is corrosive. I know after all these biostatistics and math, you're like, this dude's telling us politics sucks? Thanks, man. But my research as an argumentation scholar, as a debate coach, as an elected assembly delegate for this district in politics, is to find out why politics are so corrosive, how we can maybe develop an alternative method for that, and how to put it into action. A few months ago, I launched a project called Truth and Argument, where I used some of the findings from my research to use it with my debate students, with my students in class, and I took to Twitter, a bit of a wild west of the marketplace of ideas, to engage with public intellectuals and authors and writers on topics using this argumentative model of needs-based understanding. So first I'm going to talk about a little why politics are so corrosive. The first reason comes from evolutionary anthropology. It's embedded in us. That's the bad news. Tribalism and self-righteousness are part of how we've actually survived and thrived as a species. But as civic society has kind of moved forward, we've found ways to mitigate the damaging impacts of this tribalism through things like sports and politics, which are supposed to be, theoretically, kind of fun ways to play war, to get that out of our system. But politics doesn't feel fun anymore. It feels like no matter what happens, when someone doesn't agree with you, they're met with vitriol and disgust. It's gone far beyond fun banter and trying to get to policy. So why is it so bad now? The second comes from cognitive linguistics. Jonathan Haidt tells us that the way we see deliberation and argument play out on a bigger scale are how we learn to deliberate and argue. So, I don't know if any of you have watched Fox or MSNBC or read Vox or Slate or Breitbart, but the concept of argument in these mediums used to be cooperation and understanding. When Gore Vidal and William Buckley, or when Nixon and Kennedy would debate, it would be from a general premise to move things forward, progress through policy. But now it isn't. Now we pit people against each other for the purpose of media theater, for the purpose of for-profit news consumption. So how do we break through from that as consumers? Well, we start right back from the beginning, the very bottom, human needs. From Abraham Maslow to Max von Keefe, it's been widely had in consensus into the social sciences that there are basic human needs. No one wants to go hungry. Everyone wants to feel purpose. Everyone wants to feel community. This is important because it is a baseline of commonality that we can all use when approaching discourse, deliberation, and argumentation, even about issues that we feel like we're widely differing on. But how do we apply this in argument? Well, the nonviolent communication theory in psychology posits that all violence, not like hitting people violence, I mean, don't hit people when you're talking to them, but like violence in communication, so guilt and shame and obligation and coercion, all violence is tragic expressions of unmet needs. And this theory has been used to heal interpersonal relationships that are highly damaged. But you probably are thinking there's a difference between a father and a son, for example, with a damaged relationship, and these wide gaps in our political discourse. But maybe let's see how we can apply needs-based communication to political argumentation. Let's take immigration. So the characterization would be in immigration that it's racist bigots who don't like anyone, who want an ethno-nationalist state, versus open border hippies who have no conception of a national security apparatus. Neither of these things is true, though, right? On the one hand, we have a group of people who want to address national security concerns and credible threats. That's safety. They're concerned for their safety. And on the other side, we've got folks who want to adhere to the same values that we always had that have allowed people from other countries to come here and thrive, like all of our ancestors did. That's empathy. Safety versus empathy. Or take healthcare. In the healthcare debate, some would have you believe that it's a bunch of lazy freeloaders who just want the nanny state to pay for everything. And on the other side, it's, well, they want sick people to die. Neither of those things is really true, though. Those characterizations make it impossible for progress. What it really is are people who want accessible and affordable access to a certain baseline level of comfort that we should have in the wealthiest nation on earth. That's rest and comfort. And on the other side, some folks don't want to saddle future generations with debt that is incomprehensible such that those social safety nets will eventually erode. And they don't want to have to give up their hard-earned labor for an individual mandate. That's autonomy. Comfort versus autonomy. So how can this help us? We have forgotten that the purpose of argument is progress. Like Miyagi said to Daniel-san in The Karate Kid, you learn karate so you don't have to fight. The purpose of argument is to compete in the marketplace of ideas so that we can come to some collaborative cooperation and understanding of the best ways to move forward. Not to win, not to be right. The baseline, the starting point should be how to solve best for human needs, and the end point should be collaboration. And in this, after an hour of science, we've lost a little bit of ancient wisdom that talks to us about the necessity of balance. If it's innate in us to be tribal, then we have to recognize that the liberal view, the conservative view, they're both absolutely necessary. But we all must work together at a certain point, but we can't do that if we don't speak to each other. In the Truth and Argument Project, I actually engage mostly with liberal thinkers, even though I'm left of the spectrum. A Salon writer, Andrew Keefe, wrote an article called Immigration Bans Are Racist. So I engaged with him on Twitter, and I asked him, so Andrew, are all immigration bans racist? He went, yes. Okay. Is there somewhere in between addressing national security threats and open borders? Well, yes, of course there is, but this isn't it. Right, that's not my question. So how about extra vetting? He said, well, yes, but not against Muslims. I went, okay. How about places where we can discern credible threats, like, for example, places we may even have business interests with, like Saudi Arabia or Pakistan. Maybe accessing records more, and then absolutely letting folks in so that we can still be the melting pot that we are. Could there be a policy there that you would agree with, not enacted by this president? He said, well, yes, of course, that's just reasonable, and I think so. And then we went on and on and on. Yeah, that's right. On Twitter, the medium that has the attention span of a squirrel, we actually ended up having a discourse about immigration that didn't turn out to be a dumpster fire. So I hope by addressing needs and going with the intent that we should collaborate and that the purpose of argument is progress, I hope one day we can start to move things forward just a little bit through argument. Thanks.
Thank you, Calvin. As the person who's usually the lefty radical at Thanksgiving dinner, I'm sure my family would enjoy hearing your talk. Yeah. But as a teacher of argument and as someone that is absolutely concerned with how we can increase and improve democratic practice, I really appreciated the concrete ways that we can do things like address human needs across the spectrum instead of thinking about it as a liberal or a conservative problem. So thank you for those insights.
Thank you.
Now we have some questions from our judges.
So I'm wondering what your opinion is about how we've gone from a society that approaches discourse as a means of progress to a society that just uses it as entertainment.
Yeah, that's a harrowing and a little bit of a frustrating answer, but it goes back to more of Jonathan Haidt, the cognitive linguistics argument. there's been a very concerted and intentional consolidation of wealth and power at the very, very top rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. For example, 20 years ago, when we had far less channels, we had 14 media companies that controlled somewhere between 81 and 84% of the mass market media we consume. Today, there are 4 companies that basically have domain over 92% of what we consume. And in that time, it wouldn't be a surprise to anyone that we've moved from an expanding middle class to a shrinking middle class. Now, why does this happen, right? It's the only way to consolidate wealth and power is to constantly assault everyone else, the middle class, the working class, everyday folks, with a way for there to be division. So social cudgels, and every day it's something different, right? It's a bathroom or a tweet or a handshake. If we're fighting every day over everything, then we won't be able to unite with any measure of progress. So the frustrating answer is it's intentional. There's a for-profit media industry that actually thrives on our ability to see political policy as a theater of combat, as mortal combat, and not as a means towards progress. Uppy, uppy.
Yeah, I just want to make sure whether this boy has a question. So, well, so I enjoyed your presentation of 7 basic needs as the basis of those discourse and argument. But I would like to ask a more practical questions that, you know, a lot of times, I think you mentioned that when you watch like the YouTube and then like Facebook, there's a lot of discussion that I don't want to look at. Based on your research in progress, is there any quick fix for those phenomena, or is it, can YouTube do something as a moderator that actually mitigate this malignant and then violent kind of discussion that doesn't lead to anywhere? Yeah. Absolutely.
So the overlap of cognitive linguistics and neuropsychology here is really useful. There's some work by Michael Shermer that speaks to this. And it's that living in a post-fact era actually isn't as bad as it seems. It may be a more recognition of reality. If we're going to go back to the very first speech, perception and reality, facts and data don't actually matter to us. Confirmation bias is very strong. They only matter insofar as to either feed, it's all right, big guy. Here, bring him up here. If it's either to feed into the worldview we've already created or to reject it violently. So the best way to intervene in conversations is actually from a place of empathy. Not empathy like, oh, I'm so sorry you feel that way, like rational empathy. So when I insert myself into Facebook conversations that are dumpster fires, usually I go, look, here's what I'm seeing. I know you, John, are saying that you feel as if maybe your safety is under attack because we're not properly vetting folks, right? And on the other, Jack, you're kind of tired of being called a racist because you believe that, right? That's a little frustrating, I'm sure. So maybe instead of doing that, maybe we can find some policies where these two things overlap, where maybe we can come to some measure of compromise. How do you all feel in this thread about that ascription of those two sides? And I found, even in discussions on Facebook with academics, with theoreticians, and even with just like friends from high school, generally, being understood is a very good starting point for not being so angry. And anyone who's been with a spouse ever knows that understanding how they feel as a precursor is much, much better than defensiveness. So that would be my immediate kind of quick fix, because it de-escalates everything and it taps into our primal need to not fight. Yeah.
Thank you, Calvin.
Thank you.